Newcastle were once one of England's biggest sleeping giants. And after a massive takeover by the Saudi PIF, they found themselves back in the Champions League and winning trophies again. But due to a mass exodus of players and poor performances, the club finds himself in trouble once again. Who is to blame? Is it management or is it ownership? Let's find out. Welcome to another episode of TANFC, where we break down football developments holistically to inform the opinion of football fans and ultimately make it easier for viewers to digest. So, Newcastle are arguably one of England's biggest football teams, and they were once one of the biggest sleeping giants in European football. The club found itself in the middle of a 70-year trophy drought, and for the last 2 decades, the club has been in and around the mid-table. And they were fighting relegation at the time, during 2021. And that's when they experienced a massive takeover by the Saudi PIF, during the 2021-22 season. And this brought about a lot of optimism from the fans and from the media, because in their opinions, they believed that through the help of state ownership, they could reach new heights and basically replicate a model similar to Manchester City. Now, a bit of a background on the Saudi PIF. Basically, we should all know that the Saudi government is doing a takeover in all sports throughout the world, which includes sports like boxing, MMA, golf, WWE, and even football. Not only have they injected billions into their own Saudi Pro League, but they also bought English giants Newcastle United. For various reasons, whether that be sport washing or to increase their soft power, we'll let you decide. Anyways, Yasir Al Rumayyan, who is the governor of the Saudi PIF, was then appointed as Newcastle's chairman. So in 2021, they hired Eddie Howe and avoided relegation and were even able to finish in the top half of the English Premier League table. The following season, during the 2022-23 season, they even got a top 4 finish, which means that they qualified for UEFA Champions League football. Then the season after, during the 2023-24 season, they got a 7th place finish. And then again in the 2024-25 season, they got a top 5 finish, which means that they qualified again for the UEFA Champions League, and they beat Liverpool in the League Cup final to clinch the club's first trophy in about 70 years. Now, what's interesting to note, during this period, the Saudis' financial muscle was finally starting to pay off. And under sporting director Dan Answorth, with a large amount of input from Eddie Howe, they were able to sign a bunch of world-class players, such as Alexander Isak, Anthony Gordon, Sandro Tonali, Bruno Guimarães, Kieran Trippier, Dan Burn, Tino Livramento Harvey Barnes, and Lewis Hall, to name but a few. So, during this period, the club had a stacked roster, a new Adidas deal, and the club was generally on an upward trajectory. So, things were looking good. But here is where things start to get interesting. Listen up. So, where did it all go wrong for Newcastle? From 2002, Newcastle signed Dan Answorth to be the sporting director, and they hired him from Brighton to head up the scouting and recruitment at the club, and he did extremely well. But Answorth joined Manchester United in 2024, and that's where things started to fall apart. Well, apparently. Because if you think about it, all the key signings that they had made had been done under his watch. He was then replaced by Paul Mitchell, who Newcastle had signed from Monaco. And in all fairness to him, his first transfer window, he could only sign a few players such as Lewis Hall, William Osula, and Lloyd Kelly. And in the same window, he had to sell players such as Miguel Almorin, Yankuba Minte, and Elliot Anderson for FFP reasons. And let's not forget, Eddie Howe had been fairly influential on all of these transfers. But in all fairness to him, they did qualify for the Champions League and win the Carabao Cup when he was there, even though most of the squad who had done all the hard work were made up of Dan Answorth signings. Now fast forward till 2025, the pre-season, and this is where the trouble really starts brewing. So listen up. Now Newcastle were on the verge of signing French striker Hugo Ekitike from Frankfurt, but then Liverpool hijacked the deal and signed him on the last minute. And then, to make matters worse, Newcastle's Judas, aka Alexander Isak, refuses to return to training because he was trying to force a move to Liverpool. And in a cryptic Instagram message, he claimed that Newcastle had promised him he'd be allowed to move to a bigger club if a bigger club came calling, which the club obviously went on to deny. But by the end of the window, he was sold for £120 million to Liverpool, a club record sale. Now, at the time, Newcastle needed two strikers because Callum Wilson had also left on a free. So the club signed Nick Voltemade for 80 million, a very good player, but a very overpriced signing. And they signed 29-year-old striker from Brentford, Yoane Wissa, for £50 million. And other transfers included Jacob Ramsey from Aston Villa, Anthony Elanga from Nottingham Forest, and Malik Theo from AC Milan. Now, all of the new signings had very poor seasons, with the exception of maybe Voltemade and Theo. Especially Elanga, Jacob Ramsey, and Yoane Wissa, who was signed while nursing an cruciate ligament injury, by the way. All of these players had exceptionally poor seasons. In all fairness to Newcastle, it must be said that last season they had a really bad injury crisis. Like, so bad it was almost as bad as Tottenham's. Sorry, I digress. But all in all of these players just didn't fit into Eddie Howe's very direct style of play and philosophy. So ultimately, the 2025-26 season had not got off to a good start. After a disastrous transfer window and disagreements on transfer strategy, tensions started boiling over between Eddie Howe and Paul Mitchell. So Newcastle fired Paul Mitchell, the sporting director. And then in October 2025, they replaced him with Ross Wilson. And what's very interesting to note is that Eddie Howe had more influence over the transfers while Ross Wilson is in charge than with Paul Mitchell. Now, the last season was pretty miserable for the Magpies. They finished 12th and they got knocked out of all competitions by March 2026. Now, during the off-season and during the World Cup, a complete change was going on at Newcastle United. They sold key players such as Sandro Tonali to Tottenham Hotspurs for 100 million, Anthony Gordon to Barcelona for 85 million, and they are most likely going to sell Bruno Guimarães, who said that he wants to leave the club. And what's pretty fascinating to note is that they've replaced all of these key players with some young prospects who are definitely on much lower wages. Players such as Ewan Juin, I hope I said that right, Toure from Hoffenheim, Sean Steer from Ajax Amsterdam, Adija Bamba from Monaco, who are all under 21 players. And then of course they signed 24-year-old Czech goalkeeper Lukas Horek from Braga. But, and this is a big but, all of those signings took place after they were on the verge of signing Victor Muniz, but on the last minute they once again got their transfer hijacked by Liverpool. They were also then incredibly close to signing Swiss international Johan Manzambi before the deal was also then hijacked by Aston Villa. So ultimately, it really just wasn't a good look for Eddie Howe and Ross Wilson. So in a nutshell, the club looks like it is busy changing trajectory. And even during the pre-season, changes are constantly happening. They literally fired Eddie Howe just a few days ago, which was most likely because of such a disastrous transfer window and a bad finish in the previous season. Now it's clear for everybody to see that Newcastle are in quite a spot of bother. But the question still remains, who is to blame? Is it the management or is it the owners? Now, before I get to that conclusion, I need to take you on a quick detour. Now, as we previously mentioned, the Saudi PIF are the main owners of Newcastle United Football Club. And in a nutshell, the US-Israel war on Iran in the Middle East basically increased tensions between Iran and Saudi Arabia, which really tanked the Saudi Arabian economy due to the closure of the Strait of Hormuz, which meant that the Saudi Arabian government has effectively curbed itself on spending on a lot of sporting events, including live golf, snooker, and women's tennis. Now, the question you might be asking is, how does this affect Newcastle United? Well, according to a lot of experts and pundits, Newcastle United seem to be moving in the direction of a selling club. So basically a club that sells players for high and buys young prospects on lower wages to replace them. Think of a club like Borussia Dortmund, Brentford, or even Bournemouth. Which also explains why Newcastle United intend on signing Asian Champions League winning manager from Al Ahly and former Red Bull Salzburg manager Matthias Gisel. Hope I pronounced that correctly. And basically what I'm trying to allude to, all football nerds should know that if a manager has managed Red Bull Salzburg, it most likely means that he is very good at developing and working with young footballers. But ultimately the guy has an impressive CV nonetheless. And it makes complete sense because the Saudi PIF also own Al Ahly FC, which means they are basically keeping things in-house. Which also makes financial sense for the Saudi PIF because the signing on fee that Newcastle United agreed to pay to Al Ahly Football Club of 9.5 million will still remain within the same football group. Sorry, I digress. So basically Newcastle United are looking at changing the model of the club to become more profitable and more self-sustainable. But they are doing this at the expense of the club's ambition to achieve more and win more trophies. The funny thing is though, the Saudi PIF came out and said that the geopolitical situation of the country is not the reason that the club is changing its strategy, and that the club's finances is actually very stable, and that ultimately the club actually remains unaffected by Saudi Arabia's geopolitical situation. So that begs the question once again, is Newcastle in a spot of bother and changing their trajectory because of bad ownership or bad management? Well, for starters, it is clear that Newcastle are changing their model, and that all the achievements under Eddie Howe and his sporting directors were very impressive but unsustainable due to the volatile geopolitical situation that the owners find themselves in. In my opinion, it does look like the club is going for a total reset and starting afresh. Except this time, they're doing it more sustainably and not trying to replicate a model such as Manchester City or Chelsea. You know, the type of model where the club can afford to be run less profitably, but is able to win trophies and leagues through big spending and big wages. Yes, that model. Anyways, I'm sorry, I digress. It's clear that Eddie Howe was able to take Newcastle from a relegation battle to qualifying for the Champions League and winning the Carabao Cup, but it is clear that the owners feel that Eddie Howe won't be able to take the club any further or to new heights. So they might as well start afresh. But please feel free to leave a comment in the comment section. We want to hear from you. Who do you think is to blame for Newcastle's downfall? Is it Eddie Howe and the management of the club? Or is it the owners due to the volatile economic situation that the Saudi PIF currently finds itself in? We'd love to hear from you guys. Make sure you like and subscribe. And please check out some of our other videos that we've done. But ultimately, thank you for watching another episode of TIMFC, where we break down football developments holistically to inform the opinions of football fans and ultimately making it easier for viewers to digest.